Miss Sneed. Good morning, Mr. McCaskill. Majida Sneed on behalf of Telly Hankton. Good morning. You just said in response to Mr. Fowler's questions, you have a lot of charges that you are in jail on now. Yes. Is one of those charges murder? Yes, ma'am. What else? Racketeering and drugs. Selling drugs. You haven't been sentenced as of yet? No, ma'am. You are facing a life sentence? Yes, ma'am. Is it your hope that you can work to move away from a life sentence and cooperate with the government to get a lesser sentence? Yes, ma'am. In terms of working for the government, have you ever worn a wire in jail in attempts to do that? No, ma'am. You have never been caught wearing a wire by someone named Bone? No. Other than this case, are you cooperating on any other cases? Yes, ma'am. Do you know how many? Not offhand. Not offhand? No, ma'am. Is it more than one? Yes. Yes? Yes, ma'am. More than 5? I don't know offhand, ma'am. Like I told you, whenever they call me, that's when I'm going to go down and cooperate. In cooperating, sometimes you are not always truthful. Is that correct? No, that's not true. The only thing I wasn't truthful about was getting drugs from Kevin, like I specified to that guy and to you. I'm saying in this case, but in other cases was my question. In other cases? No, I'll tell the truth in the other cases. No further questions. Thank you. No questions, Your Honor. No questions. The government? Thank you. Washington, if you can speak in the microphone because I'm having a hard time hearing you. So just to kind of get the record straight, you have a global plea agreement between the state and the federal government, right? Yes, ma'am. In the state you pled guilty, I believe it's to 3 murders, and in the federal one it would include 2 murders? Yes, ma'am. Then on top of that you have RICO charges and drug conspiracy charges, correct? Yes, ma'am. Then I think, particularly in relation to your state one, part of that racketeering enterprise that you are involved with is called the 3G gang? Yes, ma'am. In conjunction with your plea agreements, you have been cooperating with both the state government and the federal government on various cases, right? Yes, ma'am. You provide information, but you probably, sitting there, don't know exactly how many cases that information is relevant to. Yes, ma'am. So, I guess we will kind of rein it in and talk more about this case in particular. You listened to that phone call that was played by Mr. Fowler, and did you recognize Travis Bradley's voice on that phone call? Yes, ma'am. And then your voice also? Yes, ma'am. That was a phone call. Do you know who you were speaking to on that phone call? Not really. You were under the belief that... I apologize. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Who did you think... I answered it already. Thank you. Did you think you were speaking to a federal agent? Yes, ma'am. In that phone call, you did not provide any information of substance about what you wanted to talk to the federal agents about. Is that right? Yeah. Then shortly sometime after that phone call, you were in fact brought in to meet with me and Keith Beeress, and I think a couple other people. Do you remember that? Yes, ma'am. Is it on that occasion, which I believe is December 14th, 2015, that you had come in and spoken to us in relation to some issues pertaining to this case, meaning Kevin Jackson and Telly Hankton? Yes, ma'am. Now, Mr. Fowler had gotten out of you that Isaac Skinner and Travis Bradley had gotten you to lie. I mean, you are your own man. So you chose to come in and provide the government with a lie? Is that right? Yes, ma'am. So that is on you, right? That's not on anybody else? No. But you provided us with a lot of information on that date of February 14th, yes, ma'am, 2015, right? Yes. The vast majority of the information you provided us with, you say, was the truth, right? Yes, ma'am. Let's talk about all of those things. Do you know Kevin?
Yes.
How do you refer to him? Do you refer to him by Kev?
Kev, yes.
You know him through his father, Daryl?
I know his father. Of his father. I don't know his father personally, but I know him from living around the way where I was hanging at.
That would be the 3NG neighborhood, like 3rd and Galvez?
Yes.
So his father lived in that area?
Yes.
You also knew his brother named Ahmad?
Yes.
Did Ahmad also live in that area?
I think he hung in that area.
So how was it that you knew Kev?
I know him before. Just meeting him, period. Like, you know somebody on the street. Just know them personally.
Go ahead.
Personally.
So out and about town, at some point you came to know Kev?
Yes.
Approximately how long ago do you think you first met him?
Probably the 90s.
So you also had given us information on that date that you didn't just know Kev, but you knew some of Kev's cousins, an individual you refer to as T?
Yes.
And then you also knew, and I apologize if I get this wrong, J Dummy, who also goes by Zipper?
Yes.
That is also one of Kev's cousins that you knew?
Yes.
That cousin used to cook crack for you?
J Dummy, no. T.
T used to cook crack for you?
Yeah.
Now, you also had given information that Kevin's wife used to run a restaurant.
Yes.
So all of these things you gave us, this is true information that you had?
Yes, ma'am.
You knew that Kevin had a tire shop?
Yes.
Did you know where that tire shop was located?
Yes. On Chef Mentor.
You knew that Telly's son, Little Telly, had worked at Kevin's tire shop?
Yes.
You also stated at some point an individual, Damian Barnes, or the nickname AD, had stolen one of Kevin's motorcycles. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you knew Kevin too?
Your Honor, excuse me. What relevance is this to the issue for which he was questioned on direct as to the lie he was put up to? Well, you can't isolate it. There are conspiracy counts, and whether one knew the other is something the government has a very heavy burden of proof on. The objection is overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you had known that Kev had ridden motorcycles before. He used to ride motorcycles?
Yes, ma'am.
You had also stated that you were on the same tier with Kevin, and was that in St. Tammany Parish Prison?
Yes.
And that when you were on the same tier as Kevin, you learned that Kevin was receiving letters from Telly's mother. Is that right?
Yes.
You also had made a statement Kevin was proud of being Telly's cousin. Is that true?
Yes.
Why would you say that he was proud of being Telly's cousin?
Because he was always running his mouth. I mean, you know, just boastful.
Who was always running his mouth?
Kev.
How was he running his mouth about being Telly's cousin?
Just boastful. Boastful. Like he was proud of being his cousin, you know.
You also had stated that Kevin expressed to you that he was worried about Beatty testifying. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that?
Because when we would go out in the yard, he would inquire about Beatty.
When who would go on the yard?
Kev. When all of us, when on our tier, would go in the yard, Beatty wouldn't come outside.
Do you know who Beatty is?
I met him that day when I came. Well, he was my cellie before in OPP, right? But I wound up going in the hole the same day that Beatty came there. I felt he was in danger, so I sent a kite to get him out the cell with my other fall partners from the state case, right?
Uh-huh.
Just so happened, when they brought me from Angola to St. Tammany, Beatty was in a holding tank. Do we know Beatty's name?
Do you know Beatty's real name?
No, I just know him by Beatty, ma'am.
Do you know his relationship to any of these individuals?
Yes. He was telling us, like in 2012, that Telly was his brother-in-law.
So you said you felt like his life was in danger. Whose life did you feel like was in danger?
Beatty.
In danger in what way or why?
Just, they was trying to build a case on Kentrell Hickerson and Chris McCann. So I couldn't really get him out the cell because I was in the hole. So what I did was put a sign in the window of the Tier A1 and let them know to make him check off. So he wound up coming in the hole by me.
Then you had also provided information that you knew Kevin supplied some people with heroin from his tire shop. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did this information come from Kevin?
Kevin, yeah. And Al. But Al is dead.
So did Kevin tell you that he used to deal with an individual named Michael White?
Yes, he knew Michael White.
What information did he tell you about that?
He knew Michael White from the area, and Michael White got busted, and he think he cooperating with the government.
Was he concerned that Michael White was going to turn him in?
He said Michael White was. He think he was telling.
Did he tell you also that he used to deal drugs with the Sterling Lewis?
No. Sterling Lewis was from the area. That's Michael White's cousin.
Do you know he was involved in selling drugs or getting drugs from Kevin?
No, ma'am.
You said Alan is dead. Are you aware that Alan used to distribute drugs either to or get drugs from Kevin Jackson?
Get drugs from him.
You knew Alan would get drugs from Kevin, and would he get drugs from Kevin's tire shop?
He would just get drugs from Kev. I can't specifically say the tire shop, but I know he said he was dating his cousin, a female, something like that.
Do you know the name of that cousin?
No, ma'am.
You also had provided information that you knew Squirt. Do you know Squirt's government name, his real name?
No.
Do you know if Squirt is a Hankton?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you know Squirt?
From uptown. He had a black fur run in the 90s, and I used to get coke from him.
How much coke would you get from him?
Like a quarter. $200 worth.
You're talking about in the 1990s?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point, did he get arrested and go away?
Yes, ma'am.
You also have given information that Telly was leasing a club on the southwest side of Houston called Breakers?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you have that information?
That's what everybody was saying from the city.
And had you ever personally gone to that club?
Yes.
You also stated that you had spoken to Troy Hankton. Was that while you were incarcerated?
Yes.
And at that time that Troy Hankton had told you he used to hustle a lot?
Yes, ma'am.
So all of those things that you shared with us on that day are true?
Yes, ma'am.
But when you stated that you had personally bought heroin from Kevin Jackson, that was not true?
Yes, ma'am.
That's argumentative. I would object.
Let me hear the question again.
I said, when you stated that you personally bought heroin from Kevin, that was not true. Is that correct?
The objection is overruled.
Thank you. So when you informed the federal government that you had met Kevin at Roman and 2nd Street to score from Kevin, that was you who provided that lie?
Yes, ma'am.
When you informed the federal government that you owed Kevin $5,000 for 2¼ ounces of heroin that Kevin had fronted you, that was you who provided and made up that lie?
Yes, ma'am.
And then when you stated also that you used to score heroin from Kevin about once a week, that was you who, in fact, provided that lie?
Yes.
Those are all the questions that I have. Thank you.